right. Hi, Max. Thanks so much for joining me. Do you want to just, give us a little introduction and background about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Laura. I'm Max Labaton. I graduated in 2020 from Duke University, where I majored in public policy. And in the fall, I'll be going to law school at Harvard.
Pretty exciting stuff. And I would love to just hear a little bit about, the Jewish community at Duke and sort of how, if and how you engaged with it when you were there.
For sure. So yeah, there were many ways to engage with the Jewish life at Duke, and I'd say fairly loosely involved. I'd go to weekly services for Shabbat at the sort of the Freeman Center for Jewish Life. I'd go sort of periodically with friends. There's good community there, and there was always free dinner, and the food was pretty good. So that was definitely a highlight. And I'd go to high holidays there. But I think there were definitely people who were a lot more involved in Jewish life than I was, and then there were some people who were really never involved. So I'd say I was somewhere in the middle, and I'd say that was sort of the extent of my involvement with Jewish life at Duke. And I got to know the rabbi. Sometimes she would hold weekly seminar discussions, which I did, especially as a freshman, where you discuss kind of Jewish texts in the context of contemporary issues. So that was fun too. But overall, I thought there was a strong Jewish community, and it was definitely out there if that was something that people wanted.
That's great. That's great to hear. Was, Jewish life on campus a part of your, criteria, or was that something you were looking for when you were looking at colleges as a high school senior?
Yeah, to be honest, it wasn't a huge factor. I had grown up in a community where there a good number of Jewish people. Certainly, there were a lot of Jewish students in my high school, and so it wasn't something I really thought much about. And I think among the schools I was looking at, they were all, they all have vibrant Jewish communities if that's something you want. So for me, it didn't really make or break my decision.
Okay, good to know. And you mentioned the tech studies with the rabbi. Is there anything else that you think, whether or not you participated in it, do you think there's anything unique or special that, about Jewish life at Duke that people should know about?
Um, I think it was just an overall really strong community. I always I found it as kind of like a way to, especially the weekly Shabbat services, just a way to decompress, to sort of, maybe after a long week, to see people who I might not see otherwise through other friend groups or on campus organizations or classes. And I also just really liked the campus rabbi. So, that was, those are all aspects of Jewish life at Duke that I found enjoyable. And, whether that's unique to Duke, I don't really know. I imagine you can find that kind of community maybe on other campuses, but, I can only speak from my experience.
Yeah, no, but I think a good rabbi who really interacts with the students is something that's important. Um, did you encounter or witness or know about any sort of issues of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel bias? I know there's a lot of that going around on different campuses now.
For sure. I think there were some, as far as I can recall, and some of this even though it was only a few years ago, it feels like ancient history, especially with the pandemic.
Mhm.
But there were some anti-Semitic hate incidents. So I think there was a swastika painted and a sort of on a campus mural.
I remember that it was after the Pittsburgh shooting.
Yeah, it was right after that.
National news.
And I don't think it was ever true. I don't think we ever found out who did that, and I'm not sure it was a community. I'm not sure it was a Duke student. I mean, it might have been just someone in the community. So we haven't, as far as I know, it hasn't been traced. In terms of so that's sort of the anti-Semitic incidents, or yeah, that was the one I remember the most. In terms of more anti-Israel, there was, I think, a decent amount of that, but I don't think anything out of the ordinary for what's just on college campuses when you have people from all kinds of different backgrounds. There were groups that were very pro-Israel. There were groups that took a very different side with regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think that sometimes there were events that would, maybe there'd be a protest against a speaker, or there'd be events. There would be sort of events featuring these, very like anti-Israel speakers, but I don't think that's anything out of the ordinary. And college campuses, I do remember UNC had some event that kind of got them in hot water, where they had it was like a conference on Gaza. I think it was on Gaza. I can't remember. But it had to do with Palestinian rights. And then there was sort of a rapper who was sort of, had a bunch of anti-Semitic lyrics in his song. And so they kind of got in hot water for that. But
I remember that too. But it sounds like it wasn't something that affected your experience, or made you feel intimidated or uncomfortable on a regular basis. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah. As far as me, I never really felt uncomfortable. And I think there were very few, if any, students on campus who I thought were anti-Semitic. Even people who took sort of these stances that I disagreed with. I think a lot of it is just, is sort of maybe a lack of full context or information. I think that's something we've seen even in just the last few days, on social media. A lot of people are posting stuff, and they just see a graphic on Twitter or Instagram, and then suddenly they think because it fits a certain lens, they think it's, that suddenly they're an authority. And the reality is it's more, I think, more complex. But you get a lot of that on college campuses. I think it's well-intentioned, but maybe just a little misguided.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of obviously nuance to the situation, and I think there's a lot being done in the Jewish community to help educate high schoolers in sort of how to address this and how to hopefully educate people so that people are able to make more informed decisions.
Totally.
That's great. Well, is there any advice that you would give to yourself as a high school senior, or any other high school Jewish students who are going through this process for the first time and looking at schools for next year?
Yeah, I think a lot of my advice is advice I would give just to high school students in general, which sort of centers around, sort of find out what you're passionate about. I think that's really the point of college. Explore your interests. Don't close off avenues before you've, don't close off areas before you've kind of, tried them. I would also say, find a community. So whether that's a community like Jewish Life or Hillel or something else, I just think that's really important. To feel a sense of belonging. And I know that really helped my college experience. And then I guess as it relates to sort of your last question, try to seek out diverse perspectives. I think this is applied to what we were just talking about. But I think it applies for anything really. I mean, the goal of college is to teach you how to think, but not what to think. And I think that applies to something like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it applies to really everything. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to put this out there and help students on their journey. And good luck at Harvard next year.
Thank you, Laura.